With the flick of her pen, she writes.
Chapter 9. Treasure Awaits. When Kylie opened her bag, she saw that there was a call from an unlisted number. That's odd, she thought as she checked her phone. No message from the number, so maybe it was some sales call, or worse yet, her ex-boyfriend Josh calling to check and see if she was really okay without him. Screw that, she thought, shutting off her phone and asking the barkeep for another Mai Tai. She was on vacation, for heck's sake, and she didn't want to think about old flings or anything else for that matter. She wanted to get out and cut loose. She wanted to adventure, and she wasn't going to find it sitting in the local hangout counting her stash of old coins and wishing they were enough to take her far away from this place. Hands covered her eyes, and she smelled the sweet scent of pinyon pine and musk. It tickled her nose, and the hands of her eyes felt vaguely familiar. The shape of them had a strong feeling, and they evoked a knowingness in her heart. "Tyler, what are you doing?" she asked, pulling the hands away from her eyes and shifting around on her bar stool to partake in her friend and very former high school ex. What was he doing here, she thought a little too excitedly. "Surprise, kitten," Tyler said, also a little too huskily. Oh, maybe he should have said, "Surprise, kitten." At the sight of her, "I've got a proposition for you," he said, smiling and picking up her almost empty glass to swig down the remainder of the drink. "Hey, that's mine." Kylie, who didn't really like to be called kitten unless it was Tyler doing the calling, pulled the empty glass from his hand to see the bottom clearly empty now. "No fair, you owe me another one," she said, sitting down, as it felt like the best thing to do at the moment. She was trying to control her reaction at the sight of him. "A lot more where that came from," Tyler said, taking a seat next to him. Him and her. Oh my gosh, he's got me flustered. "Come back home for a while," he said, looking down at the marred bar top to avoid her gaze. "I'm sorry," Kylie said, with a true feeling in her heart. Dame Marsh, as she liked to be called, had died too soon, and there was talk around the small town that had been a mystery as to how it had actually occurred. "Yeah, well, she wasn't always the nicest of people, you know," Tyler said, knowing that his mother had her own share of bad dealings with many of the townsfolk. She was driven by power and a greed for the rich life. There was talk that the large homestead had really been swindled from an unsuspecting land developer in exchange for a large sum of cash and some old favors being called. But the rumors didn't end there. Dame Marsh was said to have the key to a very old and powerful treasure. She had never really divulged anything of the sort to anyone but Tyler, had heard enough talk from the old sailors in town to know that something was up when it came to buried treasure in the area. And now with Dame Marsh gone to the pearly gates, he was curious about finding out more. "Hey, kitten," he said, twirling a straw around in the fresh Mai Tai that Jake the bartender at the Rusty Nail had so expertly poured as he watched with curiosity as to why Tyler Marsh was hanging around the old place again. "Hey, come over tonight," he said, watching her face for any adverse reactions. "All is on the up and up," he said, taking a long sip of the drink. "I can't, Tyler," Kylie said, feeling a little silly whenever he was around. "I've class tonight," she said, knowing full well she did not. Everything was just happening a little too fast for her. "Oh, really?" Tyler said, clearly getting the feeling that she was not being forthcoming. "Yeah, really," she said, jumping off the bar stool and grabbing her bag. "And I'm late," she said, throwing down a $10 bill and pecking Tyler on the cheek. "Maybe some other time," she said, making a dash for the door before he could even protest. What the what, Tyler thought. Why was she trying to avoid him? Could it be the time that he told her he was coming back for her? And then he had never shown up? He had had a perfectly good reason, but Kylie did not want to hear about the fact that his ex-girlfriend had needed a shoulder to cry on after her latest breakup. I mean, come on, really. She was no one's fallback. Well, treasure and going to wait, Tyler thought, bounding up and out the door after her, catching her trying to unlock the door to her old Camaro, her keys fumbling in the lock. He placed a hand on the small of her back. "I won't run this time," he said softly. "I promise." After all, he wasn't pledging love to her. He just wanted a partner he could trust for this adventure. "Kitten, come on," he said, hoping that this pleading voice would change her mind. She faltered. If anything, Kylie was a softie at heart, and she had known this old friendship had stood the test of time, even if there were long pauses in between. "What's in it for me?" she asked, hoping it would be more than a night spent in his arms. Been there, done that. She wasn't sure any type of relationship was good at the moment. "Half of whatever we find," he said, knowing she couldn't resist. "You definitely could use a new car," he said, helping her unlock the door and pushing the creaky door open so she could fold herself into the tattered interior. "I'll tell you everything over dinner," he said, knowing he had her curiosity piqued. She hesitated and then put the key in the ignition, only to hear a loud click, click, click sound. "The alternator again," she sighed. "Okay, but no funny business. And it has to be better than Charburger," she said, looking up at him. "Only the best for this crew," Tyler said, excited again about something in his life. He had reignited an old friendship. Dame Marsh could no longer hold anything over him, and an enormous treasure in the form of 40 million gold ingots was just waiting to be found. "Chateau Miguel's at 8, he said. "My treat." He winked as he pulled the latch to the hood. "And I'll even jump you," he said slyly. The Camaro, that is," he said, laughing lightly. Kylie wondered what she had really gotten herself into, but half of anything was better than nothing right now, so she put any thoughts of relationships out of her mind and began to imagine what she might be able to do with this half. She had to know more. Tyler pulled the Jaguar over to face the Camaro, and in no time had the old car running. "You'll need to have that checked out," he said, closing the hood, and not wanting to imply that he would assist with that if she didn't want him to. "I will," she said, still with some uncertainty at the sight of such a handsome man standing in front of her. "I'll see you at 8, she said, revving the engine, and for extra emphasis peeling out of the parking lot. "Yeah," Tyler said languidly as she drove off. "Here's to 8, he said, getting back in the Jag, and then changing his mind, opened the door and headed back into the rusting mail. He would need one for old times, another Mai Tai, and the feeling that he was finally facing better times made him smile as he swirled the small umbrella and hummed his favorite song. Chapter 10, Chateau Miguel. Kylie stood in front of her closet. It couldn't be this hard to find something to wear. After all, it was only Tyler, not the King of Prussia. She decided on a tight black number that showed her hips but left other areas to the imagination. She wondered what she was doing even thinking of him like that. They had decided to be just friends long time ago, and that was what they were. But the hands over her eyes told a different story. She felt them and wondered where they had been lately. She pulled off the black dress and wiggled into a tight skirt and small bustier top. Better, she thought, pulling her hair back and fixing it in place with a Japanese comb. It felt right, she decided, as she passed in front of the full-length mirror for what seemed like the 30th time. She went to the far end of her closet and pulled out the old dress she had worn the first time they had gone on a date. It had a flowery, vintage Hawaiian print, and she looked a little like the sarong the girls in the airports used to wear when they placed the flower lei around your neck. She yanked off the skirt and bustier and flowed into the vintage dress. It felt like home, and she approved, finally feeling like her old self. She found her jewelry box hidden under her old socks in the bottom drawer. Her grandmother's old stuff, the jewelry and not the socks. She swished around the gold, silver, and semi-precious stones until she felt it. The old charm bracelet with the little Scotty dog charm, and the one that looked like an old doctor's bag. Tidbits her great-grandfather had gotten her grandmother at every birthday until she was 16. The silver charms were a little tarnished, but that only made them seem more precious to her. Kylie clipped on the bracelet and made sure the little 4-leaf clover was still there. She wasn't sure what kind of luck she was requiring, and reminded herself to keep her mind on the treasure and off Tyler's biceps. It usually made her melt, and she didn't need any distractions. She was only doing this for the new car and someone to talk to. She had been feeling a little lonely lately, and realized that was of her own making. She had to get out more. She grabbed her cell and realized it was 7:30. She was going to be late if she didn't leave now. It would take the ferry at least 20 minutes to get her across Little Bay and back onto the mainland. She often wondered why her grandmother had wanted to live out on the old island with the little chapel on the hill. but she had decided long ago to forego wondering why her grandmother had done many things. Kylie didn't want to know on many occasions, and so she focused her mind on getting the Camaro going and getting to the ferry before the last load pulled out. The boat wouldn't be back tonight, and so she needed to find somewhere to spend the night. And no, she was not planning to spend it with Tyler. Kylie was smarter than that. She made arrangements at her friend Megan Rose's to spend the night at the vintage bed and breakfast. Megan owed her a night after the last time that Kylie had saved her from the roving hands of Chatham Wallace at the Harvest Dance. So Kylie had finagled a night in the Winthrop suite, courtesy of her ability to know when two people shouldn't really be together. The Camaro started on the first try, and Kylie threw her overnight bag on the passenger seat and folded in, being careful not to tear the dress on the cracked upholstery. She pushed her bag to the floorboard and reached into the glove box, pulling out the only bottle of perfume she owned. Late Night was a sweet, sultry scent of old tea roses and musk, mixed with patchouli and sandalwood. It would have to do, she thought, although she reminded herself that every time she wore it to a dinner date, she ended up in an entanglement she hadn't wanted. Here goes, she said, spritzing the scent in between her breasts and under her arms. Best to be protected, she thought, not really knowing why she might need protection. Sometimes when she talked to herself, her spirit guide Mallory would say things that made absolutely no sense. Mallory had passed on the night of the last hurricane, being caught, wedged rather, in between the rafters of her home as the waters of Little Bay surged, and she tired of calling for help. Submerged completely for 25 minutes, she had been dead on arrival when the helicopter arrived from the mainland. Kylie's only best friend gone too soon, but ever so diligent to continue her conversations with her best friend as the ever-present and only ghost in Kylie's life. Never take each other for granted had been Mallory's first words to her best friend, who had spit out her Labor Day hot dog at the sound of the voice that had whispered behind her left ear. It had taken a while to get used to Mallory, and and Mallory had made it very clear she did not want to go to the light yet. So Kylie had forgone the almost daily calls to Father McGillicuddy's to try and have him exorcise her demon. Kylie drove the Camaro onto the ferry landing as she heard her text bell ring from the bottom of her purse. Probably Tyler, making sure she was still coming, she thought, as the phone dinged again. Tyler had taken 10 minutes to get ready and smelled like soap and masculinity, if that even had a smell. It didn't take much for him to look perfectly good, a term his old flame had used whenever she saw him get out of the shower. "Tyler Marsh, you're perfectly good for me," Lacey Drummond would say just about any time she saw him. And Tyler had tired of her and her ridiculous toy poodle Roy, who always had to sleep in the bed with them, and who would howl odiously whenever the couple made love. Tyler pulled his shoulder-length brown hair into a small ponytail and clipped the ear cuff onto his right ear. Someone told him it prevented headaches, but that had never been the case for Tyler. He just liked the feel of it, and for some reason it drove all the right and sometimes wrong girls into his arms. He clipped several $100 bills into his money clip and went to the fridge to get the pansy rose he had purchased that afternoon. It was Kylie's favorite, with its pink and gold edges on a full lavender bloom. Chateau Miguel's wasn't crowded on weeknights, but he had made reservations anyway. Certainly there would be talk of treasure and maybe old times, and Tyler was prepared for both. He waited patiently at the bar, swigging down not one but 2 Mai Tais, telling himself he needed to be calm to make sure he told her all about how they were going to find the 40 million gold ingots. But who was he kidding, he told himself. He was lonely too.